Hello, welcome to the Women in Motorsports. Joe Samaniego here, along with Daniel Zerr from Racers, the Girls Behind the Helmet, and Ben Schneider joining us from Ben Schneider's channel over on YouTube. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show Mark and Robin, and our newest one, David, for investing in the Grid Network. You too can invest in the Grid Network, get your name on the board, and of course, you could do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee. And Ben, we got to talk about ARCA Menards Series at Daytona 200-mile race. Tony Brenniger, Amber Balcaen, Natalie Decker. We also have Logan Mizuraka and Mandy Chick. All of them are at Daytona this race weekend. Yesterday, Frankie Muniz was the fastest in practice. We know he's getting a lot of attention, but one of the drivers, of course, we're following, Tony Brenniger, eighth fastest. Overall, we know she's been in this position before with a fast car at Daytona with Venturini Racing. Last year, it didn't exactly go this year. Do you anticipate a better performance from Tony as she has more experience from last year's essentially full ride to entering this year's Daytona race?
I do. And not only does she have last year's experience, she did the races on the super speedways in 2021 with Young's Motorsports and ARCA as well. So this is her third season where she'll be at this event. And, you know, anytime you get a couple of experiences under your belt, I think it's natural that you're going to be more comfortable and take that step forward and improve in your third time around. So I do expect a better performance. I know that there was some controversy last year. I know sometimes these radio messages get taken out of context, but there was a radio message that was played on the broadcast that, you know, kind of exploded on Twitter where Tony was asking her crew chief, or her crew chief was asking her if she was holding it wide open, or was she supposed to be holding it wide open and not lifting going into the corners in the draft. So that caused a whole controversy there. But again, like I said, you know, sometimes those things can be taken out of context a little bit. I don't know if it's necessarily fair to judge her entire performance based on that one confusing radio message that kind of went viral, if you will. So hopefully she can put all of that to the side and go out there and run up front with Venturini. Obviously, she's going to be with a very strong team, and that should give her the opportunity to run well and improve on her last two races here.
As you mentioned, with Venturini Motorsports this weekend, another driver that we're following, and essentially out of the female drivers, the second fastest, Amber Balcaen, 10th fastest. She only did 5 laps in practice, though. We've seen some drivers, they were doing a bit more. Amber, quite a few laps, but overall up there. And of course, she and Tony with Venturini, team known for being fast at Daytona. In total, we have 4 Venturini cars in the entry list attempting for this race. And with the Venturini cars trying to work together, and essentially, could Amber be a dark horse contender considering she has 3 other teammates, assuming everyone qualifies for the race?
Well, Joe, it's funny you mentioned that. Amber actually sat down with her own Casey Campbell a couple of weeks ago following the test at Daytona, and I think answered the question for herself. So I'm just going to play the clip from Casey's interview, and we'll see what she has to say about that.
What's it going to take to get a win at Daytona?
Well, thankfully, I've experienced it last year, so I understand the draft and what it's going to feel like. And even just at the test, I learned so much with the Venturini team, and having those 3 teammates is going to be so key. Like if you look at the years past, they pretty much lead the race and really can manipulate the race with having those 4 cars. So it's going to be huge for me. It's going to be huge for my 3 teammates. And I think as long as we all stick together and do our jobs, like there's no reason we can't finish 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously I want to be first.
Well, and speaking of Casey, he's joined the chat here, and he says Balcaen has a shot to win it this weekend as well. I think regardless of if it's Amber or Tony or whoever, I think Venturini Motorsports as a whole has to be considered the favorites. Obviously, they also have Gustine in the 25 and Jesse Love, who's running for the championship and is arguably the championship favorite in that 20 car. You know, this team is so strong on the super speedways. And even just looking at the practice chart, which I just pulled up, Joe, it looks like Tony ended up in 8th, Gustine 9th, Amber Balcaen 10th, and then Jesse Love in 12th. So the cars running, obviously, you know, practice times aren't always indicative of what we're going to see during qualifying, much less the race. But it looks like all 4 of them are very closely set up to run similar lap times there. It looks like 3 of them, at least, Jesse Love said his fastest lap on the 7th lap. The others were on lap 2. So that might have been an organized run. Of course, practice and qualifying for ARCA aren't usually televised, so it's kind of hard for us to, you know, get a read on that. any further than just what we see on the timing charts. But, I would definitely expect Venturini to be very, very strong. And Tony and Amber are going to be a part of that. And like Amber said, there's no reason that if the cards fall their way, that they could maybe run 1, 2, 3, 4 for much of the race and maybe even finish that way.
Now, of course, we have a couple other drivers in the field, starting off with Logan Misaraka, driving the number 63 Chevrolet owned by Paris Wixon. Then we have in the number 53 Ford, a very familiar name, driving for Patrick Emmerling, Natalie Decker returned to Super Speedway competition. Of course, Natalie's best finish, 5th place at Daytona in the Truck Series opening race in 2020. Logan has essentially won ARCA East Start and has finished 7th at New Smyrna Raceway last year. Logan's from Sanford, Florida, and has raced quarter midget, sprint cars, and late models. I know when it comes to Natalie Decker, she's been away from the super speedway races for quite some time. We've seen her attempt the Daytona road course in the past. For Logan, first time in a super speedway race. Also, we have Mandy Chick at her first super speedway event. She has made 2 starts, 16th place finish at the Milwaukee Mile, then 18th place finish at Lucas Oil Raceway, and she comes from a racing family, 3rd generation racer. But no laps logged so far here at Daytona. What will be a realistic goal for the 3 of them, Logan, Mandy, and Natalie, entering this race weekend?
Well, we'll start with Logan Misaraka and Mandy Chick there. I think for them, the goal is probably just going to be run all the laps, stay out of trouble, and gain as much experience as possible, this being their first starts on super speedways. Now, Logan in particular is going to be interesting because she does have experience logging laps at super speedways. If you follow her on social media, you'll know that she's part of a NASCAR racing experience. So she's frequently at Daytona, doing the ride-alongs, being the driver for those, and also being the spotter for people who pay for that experience to go drive the cars for themselves. So she's certainly familiar with Daytona, but not in an environment like this in the ARCA Menards series. So again, I think, a reasonable goal for anybody in that boat is just to, make sure you avoid the big one, if you will, and stay out of trouble and come home with a clean car at the end of the day and soak up as much experience as you can for the future. Where Natalie Decker is in her career is kind of an interesting situation. I know, Joe, you said she's been away from the super speedways in a race environment for some time now. She did attempt Daytona and Talladega last year in Xfinity with the Rayum brothers and MBM Motorsports respectively, failed to qualify for both of those events. So, it's been a little while, but like you mentioned, Decker still to this day holds the record for best finishing female driver in the Truck Series with that 5th place run at Daytona 3 years ago with Nice Motorsports. So, Natalie sat on the pole here when she drove for Venturini, finished in the top 5 that day. So, I don't know how far her Emmerling Gase equipment will take her, but if she's put in the right opportunity, we saw Dave Mader, the third in that 63 car that Logan's going to be driving. He had an epic 2nd place finish at Talladega a couple of years ago. So you just never know how the draft is going to work and who, is going to find themselves in the mix there at the end of the day. So we'll see what Natalie Decker can do in this new car.
Natalie Decker is going to be really exciting to see what she does in the new car. And then, of course, Mandy Chick, who we also have in this race as well, too. One of the things that's really interesting, Ben, when I noticed with Mandy Chick, she hasn't logged up many laps at all, really. And we have over 40 vehicles attempting to qualify for this race. Ben, when it comes to Mandy Chick, what will you be anticipating from her? And especially, do you see it going to be a big drawback considering she hasn't done any laps yet? Or the nature of Daytona just makes it where it's such a wild race, Mandy could have a realistic shot at getting a win. Getting in the field.
Yeah, well, I think she's going to be in the field. I think the entry list was up to 41, and I was hearing rumors that maybe one car was going to drop out, or one was just coming down for the practice or whatnot. I don't know exactly who that was. I don't know if Casey's still in the chat. Maybe he can chime in on that for us here. But yeah, with Mandy Chick, I know, Joe, we were talking backstage, sometimes some of the smaller teams, they don't go out for practice because they simply don't have the money to pay for, the tires or the resources that are needed to run those laps. They just want to save their equipment for when they need it in qualifying in the race. I don't know if that was the case with Mandy's team. I know she was not the only one. I think only 34 of the 40 or 41 cars ended up taking a practice lap. So, I think that, there's a lot of other drivers in that boat there. I don't expect Mandy to win. I think that would be the upset of the decade in the ARCA Menard series if she were to be able to pull that off. But again, like I was saying, I think a more realistic, attainable goal for her is to get into the race, obviously, and then to just run as many laps as she can. We got to remember, she's not an Aventurini car. Her equipment will only take her so far. Even in the draft here, there's such a discrepancy between the top teams in ARCA and some of the smaller teams that are either on a partial schedule or just trying to start out building their programs. So I think that would be a realistic, reasonable expectation for Mandy to this weekend.
Now, one of the big things with the ARCA series, we're going to see their aero package at work. And in the past, we've heard people say it's not exactly the greatest, especially when it's compared to the Cup Series, Trucks, and Xfinity Series. Bit harder to pass. You got to really work with some others to try to get around. How critical will qualifying be to be up front, since it seems like it's going to be a little bit harder to make passes at the race?
Well, yeah, qualifying is going to be very critical, more critical than it is in the Cup Series or even Xfinity and Trucks, just because of how the aero package works. And I've got to say, it's been a struggle, watching some of these races, especially during the pandemic year when the car counts were a little bit lower. That 2020 race at Talladega, I know it was infamous for how awful that was to sit through, and the epic save that Michael Self had towards the end of that race was really the only thing noteworthy to come out of that, because there was very little passing, just with the low car counts, and again, even within the low car counts, such a discrepancy between the top teams and the back marker teams. It was just impossible to get a run on somebody. So, I'm very frustrated by the overtime rule in general. I think you guys know where I stand on that, but in particular in ARCA, with these one lap shootouts here, I really hope that that's not what it comes down to, because it's not just an ARCA thing. Ever since the restrictor plates were put on these cars, in all the series, it takes almost a full lap just to get up to speed. So when you have a rule where you throw the green and the white flags at the same time to get a green flag finish, you barely have enough time to get up to speed over a full lap. That really doesn't give you enough time to get a run on somebody to try to make a move for the win. So I hope it doesn't come down to that. Maybe they've tweaked the package a little bit from year to year so that we can see a little bit better racing. But I think qualifying is certainly going to be more critical in ARCA than it is in any of the top three NASCAR divisions this weekend.
It's going to be really interesting to see qualifying coming up for the ARCA series. Thank you so much for your time, Ben. Of course, we'll check with you a little bit later as we talk to NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. But first, Daniel, we have to talk about F1 Academy. We saw more drivers announced for the inaugural F1 Academy series. It starts with the news of Carrie Schreiner. She is coming to the F1 Academy, and she's going to be with ART Grand Prix in F1 Academy. Very decorated driver. We know of all of her wins, including at Nürburgring. However, all of her accomplishments, sports cars. How big of a transition is it now? She's going to go from a sports car to essentially a Formula 3 Formula Series single-seater.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it was quite a surprising move for Carrie Schreiner. She's a 24-year-old from Germany, and as you perfectly summed up, she's had quite a big career in GT3 racing, especially. So she is in the last couple of years, she's been really specializing in sports car racing and racing some of the very competitive series in Europe. For example, like the ADAC GT Masters, where she also had a podium to her name at Hockenheim. And then she was racing in the Italian GT Championship. She also had 3 podium finishes there. One in class at the Nürburgring, at the 24-hour of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. So quite a lot of experience in GT3 cars. Also last year she won in GTC the championship in the endurance series. But her last season in single seaters, it was in 2016 when she raced in a double program in UK in the British Formula 4 Championship, as well as the ADAC Formula 4 Championship in Germany. And that was only her second season in single seaters in Formula 4. after transitioning from karting, where she had won. She was the first female driver to win the German championship in karting. But in Formula 4, I would say she never really did the click. She kind of struggled in the first year in the German series. In the British Championship, she was a lot better. She also had a fourth place finish there. But still in the German Championship, that was arguably more competitive that year. She was not quite there yet in the point scoring position. And then since she transitioned to GT cars, she never really showed interest, unlike Sophia Flörsch, for example, to come back to single seaters. And she really always said that sports cars were her thing. And also today, interestingly, she had a story on Instagram where she was commenting a headline from a German website, which described her as potentially the new German Formula 4 driver, as she came back to the single-seater path in the new F1 Academy. And she commented saying that F1 is not her goal. It's never been, and it wouldn't be realistic for her to still pursue a path in Formula 1, which kind of makes her decision to come back to Formula 4 in a Formula 1 academy kind of even more surprising, because of course if that's the end goal for her, well, probably she will have to come back to sports car at one point, and so it's going to be interesting to see where she stands in F1 Academy this year. And obviously in a very good team in ART, she will be teammate with Lena Buller, who was the very first female driver to be confirmed in the new championship. But also there are some pretty big names already confirmed there. So it's going to be interesting to see where Kerry stands as she comes back to single seated. But certainly that was a surprise move from her.
Yeah, surprise move. I think it's going to be really interesting to see. And as you mentioned, never struck me as someone with a goal of F1 being the series. I think it's just going to be really exciting to see her and then some of the names that are starting to come up into the F1 Academy. And one of the big names that we saw coming in with Carlin, it was announced that Abby Pullen from W Series to F1 Academy. Abby has had an interesting road, Daniel, from being a reserve driver, then becoming a full-time W Series driver. Now Carlin has picked her up for the F1 Academy this year. Overall, Daniel, seeing where she has come from a role as just a reserve driver to now making it into F1 Academy, could she be an early favorite along with Miriam Marti for the championship?
Yeah, good point. I think those two names really that will both transition from W Series to F1 Academy are really some of the most interesting ones that have been announced so far. Both of them really competing in W Series. Abby had a couple of podium finishes in W Series, and as you mentioned, quite an interesting career so far. Big name in the British karting scene. Then she stepped up to single seats in the British Formula 4 Championship, where she was really competitive in 1.5 stints there. In the first year, she had a lot of podium finishes. Then she came back for a second year where she was really going for the title. Unfortunately, she ran out of budget midway through the season. And then was picked up by W Series for where she immediately was competitive and had her first podium finish at Kota at the season finale, and then came back to a second. But she actually she qualified for in the top 8 for a second year in W Series after just competing in half of the events. So that was really impressive as well. And last year also. She had a very strong first part of the season, and then towards the end of the season, she was not up there in the podium scoring positions, but still finished 4th in the championship. So definitely one of the potential candidates for the inaugural F1 Academy Championship. And as you mentioned, also Nerea Marti will be also one to watch. Also Lena Buller, of course, having experience of Formula Regional. European Championship, but so many more still to come. Also, as we mentioned previously on this show, Bianca Bustamante, she's racing in the UAE now in the Formula 4 with Prema, so having a very good progression from the start of that season. In just a few weeks, she made a huge progress. So I would expect also her making more progress during the F1 Academy Championship. But with Carlin, it's definitely Abby Pulling is going to be one of the potential early contenders.
One of the early contenders, and of course, Abby Pullen is one of 3 former W Series drivers that have already said they're going to F1 Academy. As you mentioned, Bianca Bustamante, then of course Nia Marti, and now Abby Pullen. On your website, Racers Behind the Helmet, we saw Belen Garcia, who was in the W Series full time. She is over in the Asian Le Mans Series, had her first race. Is it safe to say, Daniel, that if the W Series were to come back, it's going to be much more different because it's going to be a very different driver's lineup when you have, as we mentioned, the 3 going to F1 Academy, and it looks like Belen Garcia, they're not going to be there.
Yeah, when the F1 Academy project was launched in November last year, W Series put out a statement saying that they were not competing a competing series, but more the F1 Academy having a Formula 4 machinery was more seen as a stepping stone towards W Series. While still we don't have news about W Series program in 2023, if they will come back for an on-track season, that this is still to be announced, obviously. But as you mentioned, a lot of drivers are moving on from W Series and having a B plan at least. We've seen this, as you perfectly summed up, with Belen Garcia now focusing on a sports car career. She's now really going for a LMP3 program this year, and also Abby Pulling and Nia Marti, 2 big names in W Series. Obviously, Jamie Chadwick stepping up to Indy next. So fair to say that it would be a very different driver lineup if it were to come back. But still, there are quite a lot of doubts because the season is approaching, and we have no announcement from them from any point of view, either drivers, selections, or calendars. Let's not forget that at this time of the year, last year, I was in Barcelona for the pre-season testing. They had already had the first part of this selection in Arizona. So if anything is happening this year, they're already massively behind the schedule, and a lot of drivers are moving on from that championship. So it's not looking great for W Series so far, but still, hopefully, we will hear from them soon to learn what they're up to next.
Definitely, of course, we encourage everyone to be sure to visit BehindTheHelmet.com for any news about the W Series, and of course, right here on the Grid Network. Encourage everyone to subscribe. And thank you so much, Daniel, for that. We'll check back with you in a minute again. We bring back Ben. Ben is going to come to discuss essentially the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. For all the fans that remember, it was a Camping World Series. Now it's back to Craftsman with another sponsorship deal. And Daniel, one of the drivers that we've seen driving a Craftsman truck sponsored by them was Hailie Deegan. While Hailie Deegan was in the number 1 Ford last year, now she's in the number 13 Ford this year with Motorsport Racing, and she has some very veteran, seasoned, experienced teammates with a winning history. But Motorsport, they're going to be with Ford, brand new for them. How challenging is it going to be for not just Hailie, but for everyone at Motorsport to make the switch from essentially a Toyota to a Ford, and Hailie Deegan's the one driver that has been in a Ford, but now with a new team?
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the main thing for Hailie. Obviously, she's been part of the Ford family for, I guess, this will be her 4th season now, dating back to ARCA in 2020. So, obviously that's a familiar environment for her. And for ThorSport, it's a familiar environment to be changing manufacturers. This is a team that's been with Chevrolet, been with Toyota, and been with Ford at various parts in their history, and are now returning to Ford, having brought on Hailie Deegan, kind of coming with it since she's a Ford development driver. It's not something that they haven't been through before. So if there's any team that I think can pick up right where they left off, I think it's a team like ThorSport Racing that's been through manufacturer changes time and time again, and I don't expect that to be something that is going to stand in their way of running well as soon as we hit the ground running at Daytona later this evening.
And later this evening, when we have the Truck Series, of course, definitely, Ben, you're going to be recapping all the races that we talked about on Encore with the ARCA Trucks Xfinity as well. Daytona, that is generally a wild card race. The Truck Series, we know there are several drivers who go out there, get a win. Hailie is in her third full season here in the Truck Series, but as you mentioned, fourth season with Ford, considering the ARCA. Is a win an unreasonable goal, or is that sort of a bit more expected to be contending for the win at Daytona this weekend?
Well, it's not an unreasonable goal at Daytona. I mean, you have to remember she finished second in the ARCA race here in 2020. And, she finished sixth at Talladega last year. That's her career best that she's had so far in the Truck Series. So, if she works the draft right, she stays out of trouble. I don't think, a win is unreasonable at all. In terms of a full season outlook here, you do have to remember she only had one top 10. Her rookie season only had two top 10s last year. I know people think ThorSport is going to give her a bit of an equipment boost over what David Gilliland Racing was giving her. I still don't think that DGR truck was bad by any means. It was a race-winning truck a couple of times with a couple of other drivers, but ThorSport is a championship-winning organization that's a threat to win week in and week out. So there's definitely no debate at this point for Hailie Deegan. I don't know that I would expect her to be a threat to win on a weekly basis just yet, but she absolutely should be contending for top 10s, maybe even top 5s week in and week out. Certainly by the time we get to the second half of the season, she's in. Obviously, changing teams, give her a little bit of time to get used to that environment beyond just the season opener this weekend at Daytona. But certainly by the second half of the year, you would be hoping to see her running up front a little bit more than she was in her first two seasons.
Definitely going to be interesting to see how she does at Daytona this weekend. Of course, for a full recap of all the Truck Series as well as ARCA, Grid Encore Monday. Daniel, we have to talk about some big news that came out. Sophia Flores. Last week, as we were finishing the show, we were talking about she was making the move back to Formula cars. A bit surprising considering she was doing a lot of sports car, now going back to the single-seaters. However, then it was announced she is going to be part of the Alpine F1 Academy. Really exciting stuff considering, I did not see this coming. The huge announcement that she's with the Alpine F1 Academy. How big is this for her to get this deal?
It is huge for her career because she has been going from, as you mentioned, from single seaters to sports cars in the last couple of years. In 2020, she did a double program when she first raced in the FIA Formula 3 and as well as in the European Le Mans Series. And then she kind of jumped in a lot of different cars, high level championships like DTM, World Endurance Championship. So quite high level championships and machinery. But now she will be back in Formula 3, and that came a little bit as a surprise for many. But I knew that Sophia always had the interest to come back to single seaters. And the news of yesterday that she will be with Alpine, that's really important for her because she finally has some kind of important support from an organization like Alpine, of course, Formula One team. It was really interesting. The second part of the F1 car launch yesterday evening, when really the team explained the progression that their race her program is doing, which is a very interesting program for inclusion and diversity within the organization, but also targeted for young drivers. So obviously the addition of a very established driver like Sophia Flores makes a lot of sense. also with the aim of Alpine for 2024 with the LMDH program at Le Mans. Sophia, of course, has experience in prototypes and at Le Mans. So even though she is now in single seaters, that makes a lot of sense for her, because she can keeps both the path open in single seaters if she wants to go to progress on that and potentially reach Formula One, which is her ultimate dream. But also coming back to WEC and to Le Mans with the Alpine program there. So I do believe that it's a big opportunity for her, both for a financial point of view, because hopefully Alpine will step up their support of their female drivers, because of course we also announced last week that Abby Pulling will be also on the Alpine Academy. She graduates from an affiliate driver to a full academy program. But also with Sophia Flörsch now. So, and also interestingly, yesterday evening, Alpine announced a new karting program, full female karting team. 6 young drivers will be racing under the Alpine banner. So Alpine really stepping up their game for the female driver support program.
Stepping up, and Alpine wasn't the only news about having a female driver in the F1 Academy program. Sauber, they made an announcement. Lena Buller is now going to be part of that team and their development. Very similar question. How big is this for her? And also, it's exciting because now we see Alpine. We know Ferrari have Maya Woog. Now Sauber. Do you think we're going to see more F1 teams follow with at least one female racer in their drivers program?
Yes, for Lena Buller, it's a huge also opportunity. She's been racing in Formula 4, then Formula Regional for 1 year and a half, and then coming back to Formula 4 this year as she was announcing the F1 Academy program with ART Grand Prix. So really, really interesting that Sauber F1 team, which is now known as Alfa Romeo, but obviously we know that behind the name, there's really the Sauber organization that has been racing in Formula One for over 30 years. Very important for Lena Buller to be in that program. Also, she's been struggling last year for budget midway through the season in FRECA, in Formula Regional European Championship. So really good for her also to be part of an F1 Academy program. Hopefully they will help her also on the financial side. And also good to see some F1 teams being involved firsthand in the new F1 Academy Championship. And as you mentioned, it's really cool to see more and more F1 teams having including female drivers in their programs. And Lena now is the 9th female driver to be affiliated with a Formula One team. Of course, we have Abby Pulling and Sophia Flörsch in Alpine, Maya Veog, as you mentioned, and also Aurelia Nobels, that just this morning she's been announced that she will be racing with Prema in the Italian Formula 4 Championship. Also, we have Alice Powell. She's also affiliated with Alpine in a talent scouting role. Jessica Hawkins, also ambassador of Aston Martin. Only F1 teams that so far do not have a female drivers within their programs are McLaren and Red Bull. So all the other teams currently do have a female driver. So this is also interesting, and hopefully also the last 2 teams will soon have a female drivers within their teams in a couple of years' time.
Now, Darren, I have to ask this question because a lot of fans, especially if fans are tuning in and they don't follow F1 that closely, a lot of these teams have F1 academies, development driver programs, but are not guaranteed a seat in F1. One of the more well-known cases, more recently, Juanu Zhou. He's with Alfa Romeo, but for the longest time, he was known as being part of the Renault driver development program. Along with the seat time these drivers are going to earn, you mentioned a little bit about Sophia Flörsch. She could potentially do sports car with Alpine. What other routes could this benefit, not just for Sophia, but also Lena and Mayo, who's with Ferrari?
Yeah, well, it's a very important program because you are training there with all the other drivers. So you are you have a reference with some other drivers part of the same program. For example, Maya Velga is training with all the Ferrari Academy drivers. Some of them are racing FIA Formula 2, some of them FIA Formula 3. So you have a reference, a direct reference on a daily basis on their physical fitness and on all these stuff. They are training together, but they also watching within the inside of or F1 team. So you are working together with the engineers. You are learning how it is to work in the high level environment of a Formula One team. Hopefully, they also receive some backing financially. We know that, for example, Ferrari does this with both Maya Vogue and Aurelia Nobels. They have funded seasons in Formula 4. But this is not always the case for some of the other academies, because some for the other programs, drivers still have to find their own budgets. But these are the main reasons why they are selected for these programs. You have opportunities also within the media. Of course, you have some big exposure as being part of the F1 team. So this is also good for sponsors that want to invest in these drivers' careers. But one of the main ones, I would say, that is training, really, because they are part of a team, of a Formula One team. You see on a daily basis how it is to train for an F1 driver.
Training for an F1 driver, very intense, and of course, opportunities like these, the seat time, very valuable, very exciting to see all this coming together. And we're going to bring back Ben before we end out our show, because we're going to do something a little bit different. We've done on the other programs, but the first time we're doing it here. One shining moment, the one shining moment from this past week, of course, motorsports news or results. I'll go ahead and start off first. And for me, my one shining moment has to be Sophia Flores being part of Alpine's F1 Academy. For a lot of American fans that don't follow the Formula Feeder series, unfortunately, they were introduced to Sophia Flores from that scary crash in Macau. That got international attention, especially news outlets here in the United States that don't cover the sport, and that was everyone's central introduction to Sophia. Seeing her recovery and continue on racing, it's really great to see that she did not let that accident keep her away from racing. She's more determined. She's back in it. She's done more events, sports car racing, endurance racing, and now with this seat, this is just really, I think, going to allow her. People are going to remember her for her racing accomplishment and try to put behind what happened in Macau. So, Sophia Flores, that is my one shiny moment. Ben, when it comes to you, what is your one shiny moment?
Well, the racing in Daytona isn't the only racing going on in the state of Florida this week. There's some more racing happening at New Smyrna Speedway. I want to give a shout out to Katie Hedinger. Of course, we've been talking a lot about her based on her few ARCA West starts she got last year. She's a Chevrolet development driver, and she made history on Thursday. This is from Short Track Scenes' Matt Weaver, becoming the first woman to win in a pro late model at both New Smyrna Speedway and in the World Series of Asphalt stock car racing. So well done to Katie. I'm looking forward to seeing what she can continue to do this year. Hopefully we'll see her back in ARCA, whether it's the main division, East or West, at some point this season. But well done to that young lady. She's got a bright future, and I think she's setting herself up for some really good opportunities this year and next year as she looks forward to continuing to build on her future career.
Very exciting. That photo courtesy of NASCAR Root. Daniel, when it comes to you, what is your one shining moment?
I'll have to agree with you, Joe. I would also say Sophia, because as we mentioned, a very big, important moment for her career, and hopefully that will open more doors for her in both the world of single seaters and in sports cars.
And of course, Sophia, very popular driver. A lot of folks follow her as well on social media, and we encourage you to follow us on social media. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We do live streaming on multiple platforms as well, so you could catch our programs. Even if you're for some reason unable to get to the YouTube page, you could get to our programs as well on any of the social media providers we've mentioned. And of course, be sure to follow the website, racersbehindthehelmet.com. Get all the latest stories, including some stories that we haven't talked about yet here. Of course, Sofia Flores, as we talked about, but then there is a great story about Belen Garcia doing her full year over at the Asian Le Mans Series. So a lot going on at racersbehindthehelmet.com. Be sure to visit their social media pages as well. And then, of course, in the video description, we encourage everyone to check out Ben's channel as well as Casey Campbell, who provided that interview clip with Amber Balcaen. And once again, be sure to invest in the Grid Network through our Patreon. Calling the show, Mark and Robin invest in us. And our newest member, David, is now investing in us each and every month. You could do that as well, or a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee. You set the amount, and if you want to, you could even make your contribution to a specific on-air personnel. They'll thank you on the air for the coffee. Especially, we have a long racing season, and this is sort of the start of it all with Daytona. Then we NASCAR every week until mid-June. Then, of course, we're going to add an F1, IndyCar, and all the other series. But we'll be right here on the Grid Network, so be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. And don't forget, pick a winner as well, too. Daytona 500. A couple folks got the correct guesses for the duels. So it's going to be really interesting, fun year of motorsports. For Ben Schneider and Daniel Zeri from Racers, the Girls Behind the Helmet, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.